Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Mark Givler, joined as always by Chip Minnick. Week one in the books. Solid weekend for the Big Ten. Nothing crazy on their end, and I think maybe some surprisingly good performances in certain parts of the conference. We're going to get into the biggest game of the weekend, which was Ohio State, Texas. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but we have a lot of other stuff to get to after that. But Chip, you were right. You had Ohio State in a close one. I had Texas in a close one. Buckeyes can still defend that fourth and short better than anyone in the country, it looks like, and we're able to get out of there with a win. What were your thoughts, I guess, from your perspective after watching the game, as far as maybe what you expected coming in? Are there areas you were pleasantly surprised, as areas you were maybe disappointed? Kind of how did you feel about that Ohio State performance?
You can't say enough positive things about Matt Patricia's debut as Ohio State's defensive coordinator. I know that there's a lot of concern and angst about, how would he do as a defensive coordinator? And everyone was concerned about how poorly he did as the head coach of the Detroit Lions in the NFL. And all the things leading into that game in terms of like social media that came behind the scenes, people were very, very pleased with Matt Patricia in terms of just his acclimation to the college game. I mean, let's face it, it's been over 20 years since the last time he was associated with college football. And even then, that was as a graduate assistant. So it looks to me that he is certainly taking the talent that's on hand and molding it. Now, granted, just to kind of go a little bit further, the next couple of weeks, Ohio State, I know we'll talk about week two later on this week. They're not going to have the same kind of concerns with their opponents over the next couple of weeks. But that, if anything, I look at it like Matt Patricia was definitely, if not the story, one of the top stories on the Ohio State front. Very impressed with the poise of Julian Sayin. I agree with what Ryan Day said post-game about they probably could have done more for him, but I completely understood the strategy about not trying to do too much and not trying to have him win the game, make any kind of mistakes. I respected the game plan. And I guess if there would be concerns, it would be that Ohio State running the ball, Ohio State stopping the run. But again, let's give credit to Texas. I mean, that is one of the better teams in the country. Ohio State was going up against a really good defensive front, and the Ohio State interior defensive line was a concern going into that game. So overall, I certainly believe that Ohio State justified taking over as the number one ranked team in the country as of today.
Yes, they did jump up to one in the polls. So they're it's Ohio State 1, Penn State 2, right? So
Yep.
the Big Ten's got the top two teams in the country now. I was like, Matt Patricia was one of my unknowns going into this game. Like I just felt Ohio State had so many unknowns, and Texas had some, but I felt Ohio State had more. That didn't mean Ohio State couldn't win. It just meant, kind of the conservative thing for me was to say, well, let's go with the team that I think has fewer new things going on. With two new coordinators for Ohio State and new quarterback and new kind of a brand new defensive and offensive lines in terms of configurations there. And so, but Matt Patricia had Arch Manning in hell for 3 hours. He just did. They did such a good job in their back end of everything looked the same pre-snap from their back end. And then once the ball was snapped, it completely different looks constantly, especially that first half. This is something I got on Jim Knowles about over the years, is they realized what they have with Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese in terms of their athleticism and versatility. Arvell Reese lined up all over the place. Sonny Styles lined up all over the place. And Caleb Downs, who to me is just hands down the best defensive player in college football, was lined up all over the place. There was a play Caleb Downs started as an edge rusher and ended up back playing center field as like a cover one. It was unbelievable watching Caleb Downs operate. So they put that offense in a blender for 3 hours. They protected Julian Sayin a lot, which is understandable. They protected him well. The offensive line protected him well. I thought they did really good in pass pro. Not a great push in the run game. We'll see if that, improves. But, Texas is probably the best defense Ohio State's going to play this year. We might have watched the two best defenses in college football.
I would agree with that. If anything, I guess if there was a surprise I had about the Texas game plan is I'm not thinking again, when it came to, the failed quarterback sneak, I'm not thinking about that. But when Texas at another moment in the game, when it was fourth down, and instead of, I really believed that Texas was going to roll Arch Manning out on, basically like on a waggle play with the idea of, I know it was fourth down, but okay, like if it's not open, like you can probably get the first down with your legs. And for him to drop straight back and then, fire to the corner of the end zone where it was incomplete, I thought that was a strategic error on Texas's part. That's just my opinion. But yeah, I like you said, I think they being Ohio State and Matt Patricia, the defensive staff, I like the way you put it. Like they had them, basically in hell, just confusing with the fronts, the coverages, the pre-snap looks that, like you just referenced, the idea of Caleb Downs lining up, as basically like an edge rusher and dropping back into coverage. I mean, he certainly justifies all of the hype associated with him. I personally, for everyone that always, when it comes to the NFL draft, that I think that, they always say, well, quarterbacks are elevated. In my very humble opinion, I think if Caleb Downs was taken at the very top of the draft, I wouldn't bat an eye. I really wouldn't. I think any team that's fortunate to get him at the next level would be very happy to do so.
I think he's their most important player. Like Jeremiah Smith's amazing, but if Jeremiah, no one's wishing injury on anybody, of course, but if they lost Jeremiah Smith, they would be just fine at wide receiver. If they lost Caleb Downs, I don't know that they could do half the things they do on defense.
You're probably right.
I don't think they would have to change. They would not have to fundamentally change their offense if Jeremiah Smith was removed from the equation. If Caleb Downs was removed from the equation on their defense, they would have to completely. I think they'd have to scrap at least half of what they do. He's that good. So it's a really impressive start for them, for a team that's trying to repeat. And obviously, this puts them in a really strong position to make the play. I know it's like week one. How can you say that? But it's like you get a win like that at the beginning. And now you're taking 12 teams now. Like it is such a big boost for them to win that game. They're going to have two mulligans now, basically, in Big Ten play, and still get in the playoff. But I'm sure Ryan Day doesn't want to hear that because he wants his players to keep their foot on the gas. But so really nice opening win for Ohio State. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on the progression there. Julian Sayin, as you mentioned, very poised. Wasn't asked to do a lot, but what he was asked to do, he executed very well. Never looked like the moment was too big for him. Never looked like he was, stressed or uncomfortable. And so that's a good sign for Ohio State moving forward. That was a theme this weekend. A lot of young quarterbacks in the Big Ten making their debuts, whether it be their first starts in college, their first starts with their new teams, whatever it might be. And so Julian Sayin was just one of those guys. Bryce Underwood looked awfully good for Michigan. It was just New Mexico, so we don't have to go crazy yet. But that was impressive. He, as I've said before, is a freak of nature. If he can actually execute at a high level as a true freshman, which is really hard to do, it does change the calculus a little bit for Michigan this year. Now, the big test will be this weekend. We'll get into Michigan-Oklahoma on Thursday's episode. But that was about as good as I think you could have hoped for a true freshman, making their first start, don't you think?
I do. I didn't catch the entire game from start to finish. But what I did see of Bryce Underwood was very impressive. I mean, his zip on the ball, his command of the offense. I do like the fact that you made the point. It is New Mexico, so let's keep things in their proper context as to or at how he does. I'm not trying to wish him poorly against Oklahoma, but I mean, the level of competition is going to significantly increase. The fact that they're going on the road, it's going to be at night. So that those Oklahoma fans are going to be very rowdy and very loud. What kind of surprises Oklahoma may have for them, may have for Michigan and Bryce Underwood remains to be seen. But yeah, I thought it was a very impressive debut.
Yeah, and things will be ratcheted up for Oklahoma, no doubt. It's on the road. I think it's a game that Red Venables kind of needs. He's very much on the hot seat, in my opinion. I think if they're not going to fire him if he loses on Saturday to Michigan, but boy, he's going to have to really get things going after that. There are only so many games he can lose this year, and so that the drum beats will get louder there. So he's a guy who throws a lot of different things at opposing quarterbacks. So that's going to be a fun chess match on Saturday. We'll talk about that more on Thursday. Look, I've been harsh on Maryland. Malik Washington, oh my goodness. Freshman, 6'3", 235, 3 touchdowns. Looked incredible. Looked absolutely incredible on Saturday. Now they're like big favorites this weekend, and it's not playing anyone special. They're playing Northern Illinois, I think. But gosh, that was interesting. I mean, let me put it out to you this way. Would having a sensational freshman quarterback build in some maybe extra job security for Mike Locksley, knowing even if they don't have a good win-loss record this year, just kind of like the Billy Napier thing, if we fire Billy Napier, do we lose DJ Lagway? Do we need to let this play out another year? Do we see something like that at Maryland now if Malik Washington continues to play well?
It's entirely possible. I mean, like you said, the fact that he had a very impressive 3-touchdown debut against Florida Atlantic. I guess, if not to be Debbie Downer on this, if I was, it's not the fact when it comes to the passing game, when it comes to Maryland, it's always, in my opinion, the running game when you get into Big Ten play. So that would be if I was offering up some suggestions to Maryland, is making sure that, okay, it looks like you've really got something special there with Malik Washington, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we need to be able to run the ball when the weather starts to kind of turn colder. And what do you do on a rainy day? Those kind of things always run through my mind. But yeah, I agree with you, Mark. I think the possibility that the new athletic director may be looking at this and saying, okay, do we really want to upend the apple cart, so to speak, in terms of with the recruiting, possibly disrupting the roster? Because as well as anybody that doesn't matter, who the new coach, if they were to bring in a new coach, there's always, roster turnover. So is it worth doing that when you might have something very special in Malik Washington?
Yeah, I think Malik Washington is a wild card here in terms of potentially helping Mike Locksley save his job, or maybe lowering the bar that he needs to clear this year to save his job if you've got an exciting freshman quarterback like this that you want to keep in the program, obviously. Dante Moore at Oregon. Again, Montana State, very good FCS program, but an FCS program. 3 touchdowns, I believe, as well for him. Incredibly efficient. I think Dante's an NFL quarterback. I watched him quite a bit in high school. He's one of the best high school quarterbacks I've seen in the last 10 years. So I'm not going to be surprised if he just comes out and looks amazing this year. But good start, right? Good first start there at Oregon. Yeah,
I mean, it definitely, the level of competition, Montana State, and we kind of referenced this a few moments ago, when we were talking about Bryce Underwood, the level of competition. Oklahoma State, they're not as dominant as they were previously, but still that's a better opponent. But I agree with you. I think Dante Moore is well positioned to become one of the better quarterbacks, certainly within the Big Ten, if not of all of college football.
Well, Fernando Mendoza, not like an electric star. They struggled a little bit with Old Dominion. They did win by 13. Roman Hemby, who I really liked, the transfer from Maryland, went over 100 yards rushing. What did you make of that Indiana game? Old Dominion's pesky.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what was interesting is, I mean, right from the onset, Indiana was down. And
Mhm.
not that I don't want to sound like, oh, like an alarmist, like, oh, like they had to scratch and claw to get I mean, they, like you said, they won by 13. Like you said, they were pesky because that was last week when we were talking about this was a game that Kurt Signetti was letting the local beat reporters know, like, hey, this is a team. I agree with you. I think, like they are a pest. They're going to stick around. They're not going to just kind of go quietly into that dark night, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's a good thing for Indiana, because say what you will about the level of competition. I think to have some adversity and have to kind of regroup. And yeah, Mendoza, I know that you and I are both high on him.
Yep.
Wasn't the greatest performance, but it wasn't horrible by any stretch. I mean, there were Big Ten quarterbacks that did have bad games. But yeah, I think Indiana, that was a good thing. They were never behind until the tail end of last season when they were playing Michigan State. So I think for them to have some adversity right from the very beginning and have to kind of take control of that game and hold on to it against a decent opponent, I think it's a good thing for Indiana.
Yeah, that was an interesting game, and yeah, Signetti did his best. Bobby Bowden leading up to the game. Bobby Bowden, Florida State could be playing Florida A&M, and Bobby Bowden would have you convinced that they were playing, like the '90s Miami Hurricanes or something instead of Florida A&M. He would always just gush about the opponent. So Signetti made sure to have everyone's attention in his locker room with what he was saying about those guys. But it was a feisty effort from Old Dominion. Indiana wins by 2 touchdowns. Let's get to our guy Deshaun Foster at UCLA, because that was a little bit of what I feared. And look, I'm a big Utah guy. I've talked about it all off season. I think Utah, whenever we mention non-league stuff, I always throw Utah out there as this huge sleeper. I think they're the best team in the Big 12 this year. We'll see if that turns out to be right. They're now ranked in the top 25 after that, but they dominated UCLA. Are you concerned now? Because that was not a good start to the year.
I would be concerned. I mean, I don't think you want to hit the panic button, but I would be concerned because we talked prior to this is, all right, there's a difference between, all right, I guess in terms of the way that you lose, there is such a thing as a competitive loss and a bad loss. And in my estimation, that was a bad loss. I mean, to lose 43-10, and physically Utah was pushing UCLA around the field. I mean, they were down 13-0 at the end of the first quarter, never really were threatened by UCLA. I know that there's a lot of optimism with Deshaun Foster, but yeah, I mean, you definitely want to make sure that you're seeing progress. Now, they did finish better at the end of 2024, but yeah, to start out 2025 getting pushed up and down on your own field is very disconcerting.
Yeah, that was kind of my worst nightmare for them. Was I said I wanted to watch this and be like, okay, guys, I'm not expecting them to beat Utah, but don't get pushed around. They got pushed around, was not competitive, and the toughness questions there are going to continue. Let's jump to a interesting debut. I thought a very good one. Purdue shuts out Ball State 31-0. Okay, yes, Ball State, I get it, but that was an easy cover. I think they were 7, so they covered by 2 touchdowns. They shut them out. Their offense showed some life. Brown played pretty well. I mean, that's as good, I think, as you could have expected for Barry Odom's first game, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, you're talking about a program that had gone almost a full calendar year without victory. So, considering Purdue, just the massive amount of, I mentioned a moment ago, roster upheaval and turnover, I think, like you said, it couldn't have gone better for Barry Odom. A shutout, yes, Ball State, but you want to come out and be dominant in your debut, and that's exactly what Barry Odom and Purdue did.
What do you make of the Rutgers game? That was like very bizarre where their offense looked great for large stretches, but they couldn't stop anybody, which is really weird for Rutgers. Like, and they were on the ropes there for a minute. Like, what are we thinking about? Or was this, is Ohio U pretty good? Because I look and I'm like, well, this doesn't look good. But then Ohio U's hosting West Virginia on Saturday, and West Virginia's only a 2.5-point favorite, which is like fishy line of the week. So I guess how much of that is OU pretty good? You know, will be a contender in the MAC. How much of that was yikes? What's going on with Rutgers defense?
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about the Rutgers defense. I do believe that OU is a good team. I mean, let's give credit to them. They are the defending MAC champions. Say what you will about the MAC. They usually have, I mean, it's a lot of programs capable of being competitive against top competition. But yeah, Rutgers, they kind of pride themselves on their defense, and the fact that they weren't able to effectively shut down OU would be very concerning to me.
Yeah, and then, you know, another MAC school that kind of hung around. This one to me was a totally different animal though than the Rutgers game. You know, Minnesota pulls away 23-10 over Buffalo. I still don't know how this game was close. I watched the whole thing, or just about the whole thing. I still don't know how this game was close. Time of possession, Minnesota 38-28, Buffalo 21-32. Penalties, Buffalo 4 for 45, Minnesota 2 for 10. Turnover margin was even. Minnesota rushed for 153 yards. Buffalo rushed for 44 yards. Minnesota passed for 290 yards. Buffalo passed for 107 yards. This was like a 5-touchdown win in disguise. I still don't know how this game was close.
Yeah, Buffalo is not a bad MAC team. I mean, they weren't considered to be a favorite to win the MAC, but they're not a bad team. But yeah, Minnesota, I mean, they're never going to be flashy. You know, I think, you know, when you look at, you know, like Lindsey, I think in his debut, you know, had you know, Drake Lindsey, you know, threw for nearly 300 yards, a couple touchdowns. But you would certainly expect, you know, a more dominant performance from Minnesota, even against a not too flashy Buffalo team from the MAC.
Yeah, Minnesota's just gonna have to convert more. Right? You know, too many field goals. Not, you know, they didn't cash in enough. But that was a relatively dominating performance in terms of like the stats. But the score did not line up with that at all. So that was kind of a weird game to watch. How are we feeling now about Luke Fickell in Wisconsin? I gave him like 5 wins was like my best case scenario for them this year. I think they're like a 4-8 team. I don't know that we saw. I did not see anything in that game that would lead me to believe I'm off on that at this point. I think Wisconsin's in trouble this year.
I do too. Watching that game, you know, in Miami, I mean, Wisconsin was only up 3-0 at the half. I mean, it was not, you know, anything. And Wisconsin, when, you know, you look at the Wisconsin offensive line versus a noticeably smaller, just in terms of physical size, a Miami defensive line, you would think Wisconsin would be able to push them all over. They didn't do that. I realized that Billy Edwards Jr. left the game, but it certainly seemed as though that, you know, just watching that game, that Wisconsin, instead of trying to establish the run and get back to kind of what a lot of Wisconsin fans would think, all right, we're gonna run the ball. It just didn't seem like that. It seemed like there was a preoccupation with throwing the ball. Now, again, when it comes to Wisconsin, they're going to be playing Middle Tennessee State this coming week. Maybe they'll get things on track, but, you know, in a couple of weeks they have to go down to Alabama. Now, there's a program that's, you know, certainly the pitchforks and torches are already out. You know, so, you know, it's going to be a high stakes game no matter what.
Yeah, I think, you know, people have made comments of like, well, maybe Wisconsin's going to be more competitive against Alabama in 2 weeks than we thought. I'm like, I don't know about that just yet. I do think Alabama's got some serious identity issues, that's for sure. So we'll see. You know, my only positive for Wisconsin was, you know, they did play DeQuan Finn from Miami, Ohio, who's a athletic dual threat quarterback. The defense did play very well for Wisconsin. So that's getting back to playing, good, tough Wisconsin defense. That is a positive sign, but I still don't see any playmakers on offense. I think they're going to have a hard time with that schedule they have, but we'll see how it goes. They got out of there with a 17-0 win, a couple of second half touchdowns, and they'll move forward. And I would think would go 2-0 once they get finished with Middle Tennessee State. Chip, any final week 1 thoughts from Big Ten action before we sign off here and come back on Thursday with the week 2 preview?
I would just say that, by and large, the results kind of came out the way we anticipated. I would say that Northwestern was more disappointing. Especially for Preston Stone, he had the roughest debut by far of any of the quarterbacks in the Big Ten. But that's why it's like after week 1, the old cliche coaching adage about how a team makes its biggest improvement from week 1 to week 2. So we'll see. So I'm anxious to see when we kind of turn the page towards week 2, if that proves true this coming weekend. Yeah,
that'll be certainly something to watch. I want to see the continued progression of these young quarterbacks. They did it once, in week 1, a lot of them against inferior competition. Let's see if things continue to trend in an upward direction with some of these guys, because if it does, the Big Ten might be entering a golden age of quarterback play here the next year or two with some of the young guys that we saw perform well on Saturday, or this weekend for that matter. It'll be interesting week 2. Not a great slate, but that Michigan-Oklahoma game is going to be fun. So we'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into some, we'll do an upset alert thing for week 2 if there's anyone needs to be on upset watch, and kind of get into some of the storylines there. We'll do that on Thursday for you guys. But thanks everyone again here for watching and listening. And we'll be back here in 2 days with the week 2 preview.